lousing up everything.
Labour is at fault. It's ruining the country.
My constituents, as your elected representative, I can assure you Labour's right. Management's right. I'm strictly neutral.
Labour, management, politicians, phooey. They can't tell corn from oats.
Work! It's only taking money out of
Strike!
Because you compare it to Tahrir Square, people who went to demonstrate in Tahrir Square risked being run down by police armoured cars. Many of them were killed demonstrating. Very, very different from what's happening in America or Britain.
I don't want to get distracted.
The point about the courage shown by those in the Middle East during the Arab Spring, and the courage of, you know, Bradley Manning, if he has done what he's accused of done, is those are examples of courage and integrity, of people going out and putting themselves at great risk to assert their rights, to take part in the political process and have a say in how they're ruled. And that example makes me, and has made me feel that I need to go out and do something for myself. Seeing that kind of courage, I think, gives a sense of responsibility to actually go out and continue that work in whatever situation you're in.
Richard. We've got a point down here, I think.
Sorry, my name's Laurie. I'm a blogger and a journalist and stuff. I wanted to come back to what Harry and I think Christian from the back of the room said about protest, because I think it's quite interesting, this reaction on the right to, you know, what is and isn't a proper protest. On the one hand, you have Harry, like a lot of people across the world actually get this same attitude in New York. People saying, well, you've had your little protest, you made your point, now go away.
Yeah.
You know, but on the other hand, you have people like Christian saying it's not a proper protest unless you set yourselves on fire. You know,
that's not quite what he said. That's not what he said. It's a gross misrepresentation of what he said.
It's
sorry.
I think it's really interesting to analyse where the tension comes in, because when people suddenly start to turn around and realise something bigger is happening, is when it moves from a movement which is about protest to a movement which is about dissent. Because protest really, you know, we've had lots and lots of protests in this country over the past decade. I think my first big political experience was the 2003, 2 million marching through London changed nothing. And that was protest. Protest is standing up and saying, not in my name, I don't want to be associated with this. And that actually, that supports the system in many ways. It's tacit approval for what a government might be doing by saying, I stand back, I opt out. Dissent is putting your body on the line or your future on the line and saying, I will not allow this to happen, I want something different. And that's what the people in London in their own way, in Edinburgh in their own way, because Naomi is completely right, you know, it has been very London-centric and that is a massive problem. That's what people are doing, and I think it's not been respected enough, the risk that these people are taking. It's a big deal getting a criminal record, which a lot of young people have. You know, I know many people who are facing, you know, jail sentences, people who have faced police violence. That is a significant thing.
As this goes on and on and on, is people are wondering how the people there are sustaining themselves, how they manage to not have to go to work every day, how they can not have to, you know, have the luxury, and it's a dubious luxury, but the luxury of not working is sitting outside St Paul's all day. That's, I think, where the chink in the arm, that's the weakest today. And that's what people are wondering.
I've met electricians and brickies down there.
I have as well, but
I've done interviews with them.
The hardcore group of people, how are they supporting themselves?
But if there's a view that the particular group that is there, and it is a particular group, and there are some problems with people who are working full-time jobs all the time, can't go in the day. I understand there's meetings at 7 p.m. and people can go in the weekends. That everyone should just go down there. I mean, that's the problem to solve capture of a movement by a particular group. It just flooded out with the rest of the population. And the people in the tents are merely representative of a particular community desire. So down at Occupy London, there's some 200 tents, maybe 1,000 people. And you might say, how can that possibly be the 99% of the country? Well, of course it's not the 99% of the country, but it represents some certain hopes and desires that the 99% has. The 99%'s not all down there, but they all want, or almost all want, those people to be there.
My name is Dominique. I'm actually based in South Africa. I live in a former Transkei. It's a truly isolated part of the world. I live in a mud hut with no water, no electricity. And I'm just asking myself if my neighbors were truly suffering from the crisis, if they were to put up tents and use the internet, would they have the same high profile as you have here?
Quick answer and then lightning hour.
Probably not. And we're not unaware of the fact we get disproportionate attention because we're in London. And it's not just people where you are who are being ignored. Elsewhere in the UK, there are a lot of occupations going on and they get no media coverage. This is something I think in London we need to work a lot harder on to actually give those people more of a voice and use our media channels to do that. But no, of course, you're completely right.
Yeah, I mean, so it's very disingenuous to say, well, it's several hundred people in St. Paul's, because it isn't. I mean, on the 15th of October, you had a globally coordinated day of action which involved 951 cities across 80 countries. And that's historically unprecedented. And Paul Mason made a really great comment. He said, the last time when you had the end of globalization 1.0, the response is introverted. It's looking inwards. It's looking at export tariffs and things like this, the rise of fascism, etc. Instead, you had 951 cities essentially calling for a global movement against this. The comment you said about South Africa. Now, if you were to have a few tents where you were, and they said, we're part of this movement, actually, it would have got a lot of media traction. The Wall Street Journal would have said, all the way from, Wall Street to London, all the way to the Transvaal. It's a global movement. So that's the point. The reason why these people are being indulged by the media is... And that's a separate... Well, it depends. I mean, for instance, they were talking... So in this country, we've got 0.3% of people own 70% of the land. Yeah? The Duke of Westminster and the Duchy of Cornwall, the Prince of Wales. Actually, we live in one of the most feudal systems of land ownership in the world, right? So if it was about land redistribution in South Africa, which is a huge issue, and there was a movement here, as there is, say, in Brazil, for the redistribution of land, I think actually it would have a lot of pertinence, but that would be contingent upon what people's demands were. With regards to, I just want to make one really quick point about Egypt. So I've spoken to a lot of Egyptians, and they don't, it wasn't in Tahrir, it wasn't this sort of divorce from what's going on in Europe. If you actually look at the dynamics of what was going on in Egypt, they had a youth movement called Gefia in 2004. And this is exactly like what we see in Athens and what we see in Paris in 2005 with the banlieues. And it's the first time we have an urban youth movement which consciously reflects as disenfranchised and young. And it's not moving to Islamism, and it's not looking to the old kind of things of family and the mosque. So it's huge. And actually in Egypt, they say they're more like Greece than like Libya or Tunisia. So this kind of, again, it's that old trick, Egypt, these noble, courageous warriors in the third world, and we, sort of relatively wealthy people, we denizens in the global north, we don't know we've got it so good. Well, people in Burkina Faso could say the same thing for those in Cairo. They're literate, they can eat every day. What do they think they're doing? But fundamentally, the problems are the same. High food inflation, high energy inflation, the inability to access housing. In 2008, who won the World Bank's award for best reform in the developing world in terms of implementing reform? Who won it? Egypt. It was a revolution against neoliberalism. It was a revolution against redistribution of land within the neoliberal city. One huge element that's been missed out within the analysis of the occupations movement. David Harvey, brilliant on this. He talks about capital accumulation within the urban city and property development. This is a revolt primarily against the neoliberal city. It's a revolt primarily against people having to move to Zone 4, Zone 5, fast capital, and only the transnational capitalist class live in Zone 1. It's police officers as much as it is the 99... it is police officers as much as those that live there, or cleaners and whatnot. So it's a revolt fundamentally against the neoliberal city.
When anybody preaches disunity, tries to pit one of us against the other through class warfare, race hatred, or religious intolerance, you know that person seeks to rob us of our freedom and destroy our very lives. And we know what to do about it.
Now, gentlemen, no violence, please. Don't throw those bottles. Don't throw those bottles! No! No! No!